Hello, welcome back. As promised, this week I'm going to take you through the Newcastle drawing. I've started this, so I mapped this drawing out. I did use a ruler because, well, perspective is quite important in this drawing, and I don't want straight lines. And as you can see, this is the reference image here. It's quite complex. I used a ruler because there's no reason not to. I think sometimes people have this idea that you can't use a ruler in art. You absolutely can, because I want this drawing to be accurate. If I didn't want it to be super accurate, then I wouldn't use a ruler, I'd just go for it. But the perspective is important in this drawing, so I've used a ruler. I drew out the bridge first because that gave me the reference point to the rest of the drawing. So very, very loosely sketched it out, marked in where the windows are going to be, marked in the edges of the buildings and any key lines to start off with. What I didn't do, I'm not going to include the cars and I'm not going to include the people in this drawing. This is just going to be the buildings. So I am a little bit going to make it up. We've also in this drawing got quite a large grey area, which is the road. So I need to make a decision about that. I might chop it off. Because at the moment this is to scale. This piece of paper is to scale with this drawing. I might chop it off because otherwise we're going to be left with a third of the page just road, which is quite a lot. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. It might work, or I might sort of choose to cut it off halfway. We'll see. What I'm going to do with this drawing is work from the middle outwards, and I'm gonna try and get as much done on each part rather than working on a bit and then going back to it and then going to another bit. I'm going to try and complete each part as I'm doing it and work outwards. I haven't yet decided yet either if I'm going to use some tinted graphite in this rather than just pencil. So at the moment, I'm just working in pencil. I've also got tinted graphite, and I've got some that is tinted a little bit green, some of the tinted a little bit brown, and it's very subtle. But I think it might work quite well with this image and the colour palette of this image as well. So it won't make it a colour drawing by any means, it'll just add a bit of tint to it. So I sketched this out initially in a 4H pencil, and now I'm going to use a 3H to go into it with a bit more detail. I'm going to work from light to dark with this a lot of the time. So I am going to try and work from the centre outwards, like I say, but I think light to dark, starting from the middle. And when I say from the middle, I mean I'm going to do this building first, and then I'm probably going to do this building, and then I'll do this building, and then I'll go outwards, rather than all over the place. So 3H now, nice and light, but also I can add a little bit of pressure and make it a little bit darker if I want to. So I've sketched this out and I've used a ruler, like I say, but don't be scared if you want to trace it. You can, there's no rules. No one's going to tell you off for tracing it. If you want to trace it out loosely and just put in your reference points, then that's fine. If you do want to practice with your perspective, then then tracing out, not fully tracing out the whole image, but if you just trace out the edges and the key points, then it's a great way to practice learning perspective. If you do just want to have a go at it without tracing it out, then do that too. Something else people find quite helpful is finding the midpoint of the paper, which is probably about there, and using string to draw it out. That only works if your center focus, if all of your lines lead to that center point. They don't in this drawing. There is no center point to that, so it won't work quite the same. The center point for this is probably, in fact, down here somewhere, oddly enough. But don't be scared to do that. Now, it is really intimidating getting going on an image like this, especially one that's quite detailed. And now what's important to remember is that you don't have to draw all of the detail at once. I'm just going to keep my pencil nice and sharp. What I've done is, initially, I didn't have these lines, I just had the very loose lines in, and I've gone in and I've firmed up the lines on these windows. I've added a couple of the chimney pot references in, and I've started now to go into what this is quite a detailed, it's quite an intricate stone roof area, so it's like it's a wall really. If this was at ground level, it would be a wall, but it's up on the top, so it's quite an intricate stone wall. And I'm just going into that now, adding in the reference points. So if you look at the image, it's got the it's got the pillars, it's got the windows, it's got key reference points that I can just map out a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not aiming for this to look like a photograph. I'm just aiming for it to look like an accurate version of what it is and recognisable. I'm not a particularly abstract artist, and I probably never will be, because that's just not my style. It's hard to force yourself to be abstract if you're not. And it's just, like I say, it just isn't necessarily how my brain works. So it's not, doesn't come naturally to me. If abstract is what comes naturally to you, then amazing. I do have a lot of respect for abstract art, because it is really, really hard. And when I say abstract, I mean like loose brush strokes, loose pencil marks, and things like that. So like I say, here I am just going in and just adding in reference points. So I'm not going to talk all the way through this drawing. I'm just going to dip in and out when I think something useful. I've got something to say. I'm also not going to film this entire drawing. Again, I'll just dip in and out when there's something useful to say. But for now, I'm just going to crack on and keep working away on this roof. Once I've got somewhere I'm happy with the roof, I'll work down onto the stories. This drawing is going to take a long time. You can see I've marked out the reference for the top floor windows. I've not done the ones underneath, but I can use the top floor to just reference the rest of them. So yeah, I'm just going to crack on with this for now. So what I've been doing with the roof is going and adding more detail in. So I don't need to draw each pillar of this fence post exactly, but what I just need to do is add shading to suggest it's there, because this is quite big. When you move away from it, you're not going to be able to see those things, and they're just too small really to spend time adding each one individually, and I don't need to. So what I've done is I've shaded, I've added detail in with a 3H pencil, and now and then I've added a bit more depth to it with a B pencil, and now I'm going in with a 3B again, just to make some areas even darker, to add more contrast, which will highlight more detail. So I'm doing it in layers rather than just going straight in there with a really dark heavy B straight away. I'm building the depth up because you can add more depth, but it's hard to take away. So it's important just to take your time and add the layers of depth as you go, rather than trying to rush it and do it too dark all at once. A good way to know if you're creating enough depth is to sort of half close your eyes, so squint at your drawing. And you might see artists doing this on like telly or films or something, and it is effective. If you squint at your drawing, what you're doing out is cutting out the mid-tones. So all you can see is the light and the dark. You cut out the mid-greys. And this, if you just keep doing this, it just makes sure that you're adding enough contrast to actually make the areas that you want to stand out, rather than it just being a sort of series of mid-greys. So that's a little tip for you there. So tonight I've been going in to the drawing with some quite light pencils, and I've been shading in very lightly in these areas with a 5H, and then going in gradually with a 3H, a 2H, a B, and then a 3B, and just adding a bit more depth into them. And I'm not going in too heavy with dark shades too soon. I am just really lightly building them up. So like in these areas, this is a B, I'm just adding very, very lightly some of the shading and some of the discoloration on the stone as well. So you can see on this chimney stack here, I've just started to go in with a little bit more detail on the side. And I am just really taking my time with this drawing, going in really, really delicately. So I'm now at the point in this drawing of drawing out the windows. Now the windows, if you're trying to draw something and you want it to look fairly accurate, the windows can make or break your drawing when it comes to perspective. And this building is quite tricky. I'll show you it here. So we're on this building. There's lots of windows, lots of detail. So when I previously sketched this out, I'd marked out points where the windows were, and I'd drawn sort of a loose grid. What I've done now since then is try to go in and draw even more of a grid. Now what I'm doing to do that, because I'm working on top down on this building, I'm using reference points from here to work downwards. So I know that this window is in line with this window, is in line with this window, is in line with this window, and I can see that it also steps out slightly. So it steps out slightly there, so I've done that column. And the same on this side here. It goes down, but these two windows are a bit narrower than these two, and it steps out and goes down. So I've done even more of a grid. And then what I'm doing is I'm going into each window individually and very, very loosely mapping out the windowsill and then the internal window frames as well. And I'm just doing it very lightly with a 4H or even a 5H sometimes pencil. Just doing it very lightly so that I can see where each one is going to go. And I'm just double checking them all the time. They're not going to be perfect. I can already see they're not perfect, which is a little bit annoying. They're not going to be super perfect, but I want them to be the same size. I want them to be as much in a line as possible. Because windows, when they're not right, it's really obvious and it gives it away quite a lot, I think. So they're worth spending time on. So this week I've got this done on the drawing. I've done the roof. I'm pretty happy with the roof. It'll probably need a little bit more detail in it at some point, a little bit more refining. I've got a good go on the windows, just to give you an idea of how long this takes, because it doesn't look like I've done a lot, but I've been working on it most days. This took 2 hours, probably maybe more actually than 2 hours, but just that. And it's because I'm taking my time. I'm really taking my time. I want it to be right. It's so easy to mess it up, and especially when you're working with detail that's quite fine. If you mess it up and you have to rub something out, then you have to rub out quite a lot, because of the size of. Well, I've got an electric rubber also. Well worth investing in an electric rubber, by the way. People make fun of me for it, but it's great. I've got two. but it does mean you have to rub out quite a lot. I do have a putty rubber as well, so if I need to rub out a really fine point, then I can rub out a little tiny bit, but my point is still stands. If you have to rub something out on tiny detail, you do end up having to take out quite a lot of it. So you do want it to be right, and yeah, and I want this to be right. I'm not in a rush with it, so it can take a little bit longer. That's fine. Next, I'm going to do, after this side, I'm going to work on the other windows and then finish off this building. The ground floor I'm putting off a little bit because the windows are quite big. They're also not as well referenced on my image. I might have to use Google Maps a little bit to help me with this, because it has got them in there, but there are cars and signage in the way, so I can't fully see them all, so I might have to go and use Google Maps to reference these windows a little bit more. So there's a good chance that will take this week. I went along to my first art club meeting the other day, which was lovely. I didn't take this because obviously it's massive. I can't be wheeling this around on the bus or in the car with me. So I took a little sketchbook, and you might remember ages ago, I went to Edinburgh Fringe and I started a drawing while I was in Edinburgh. So, and that's in the sketchbook. So I took that along with me and got back to that. What I realised when I was doing that, because I've been taking so much time on this and getting the windows perfect, what I realised as soon as I opened up that Edinburgh drawing that I started while I was in Edinburgh, I'd got so much of the perspective wrong on it. But it's a sketchbook drawing, so I'm not too worried about it being perfect. Anyway, that was just another thing. This week I am just going to crack on with this. I'm not going to start anything on the Murmuration project yet. I'm going to hold off on that for a little bit and get a good chunk of this drawing done first. But for now, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to keep giving tips as I go through this drawing. Rather than just drawing it, I'm going to try and talk through it a little bit and explain why I'm doing things. One thing I did that I didn't actually explain, I used this card and a part of the drawing, and I'm just using it as a ruler just to keep my lines straight, rather than because my ruler's a metre long. I've got a foot long one as well, but rather than getting out a long ruler, just sort of using a little straight card just to make sure your lines are nice and neat as you're going through. That's something I did. But yeah, as I go, I'm going to keep telling you why I'm doing it, what I'm doing, and giving you a few tips as well. As always, if you've got any questions, if you've got any suggestions for how-tos, then comment below. But if not, then thank you for watching. Take a look at my website if you're interested. Follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Rachel J Harvey Art, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.